Pacific Northwest, the land of natural giants, where ocean, mountains, and forests create the most spectacular ecosystem in North America. This is the story of a legendary territory with 3 states and 1 province, united by the same wild soul, by the same waters, by the same dormant volcanoes that have shaped its landscape. A natural paradise without borders. We'll discover national parks that guard ancient forests, waterfalls that plunge into the void, coasts battered by the Pacific, among sea stacks and solitary lighthouses. But the Pacific Northwest is above all freedom. There are metropolises that breathe nature, alpine lakes where infinity reflects, and mountains that touch the clouds. Four territories and one single wonder. Welcome to America's greenest corner. Welcome to the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest is the region where oceanic climate, coniferous forests, and volcanic chains create a unique ecosystem that naturally unites Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, and northern Idaho. 4 different territories, but bound by the same green soul, by the same beneficial rains, and by the same fairy tale landscapes. Olympic National Park. Three different ecosystems enclosed in a single wild reserve. Here in the heart of Washington State, you can walk among temperate rainforests in the morning and find yourself on beaches battered by Pacific waves in the afternoon. The park preserves one of the few remaining examples of temperate rainforest in the continental United States, where Douglas firs over 230 feet tall create true natural cathedrals. But that's not all. Moving inland, the trails will take you through alpine meadows dotted with wildflowers, up to the permanent glaciers of the Olympic Mountains. The geographic isolation of this peninsula has created unique species that you won't find anywhere else. The Olympic trout and the varied thrush are just 2 examples. Every step here reveals how nature manages to be incredibly diverse, even in relatively small spaces. And among all these extraordinary environments, the Hoh rainforest is certainly the one that will leave you breathless. The silence here becomes almost tangible. Under the green canopy formed by giant maples, Sitka spruces, and western hemlocks, every surface is covered with moss that absorbs every sound. Walking along the Hoh River Trail means entering a forest where light barely filters through, creating golden beams that illuminate the moisture particles suspended in the air. Crater Lake. What would happen if a volcano collapsed on itself and filled with rain and snow from thousands of years? Crater Lake is the answer to this impossible question. This circular lake, 1,943 feet deep, occupies the caldera of Mount Mazama, which exploded 7,700 years ago in an eruption that forever changed Oregon's landscape. The water is such an intense blue it seems artificial, but it's not. This unique hue derives from extreme depth and crystalline purity. The water, in fact, comes only from rain and snowmelt, without inlets or outlets. At the center of the lake emerges Wizard Island, which is a volcanic cone that formed after the collapse and created a mysterious island, reachable only by boat during summer months. In winter, instead, snow can reach 49 feet high, transforming this place into a white and blue lunar landscape. Vancouver. Vancouver pulses between the ocean and the mountains, and is a metropolis where glass skyscrapers are reflected in the waters of the Pacific. The third largest city in Canada, it is a melting pot of cultures with over 200 different ethnicities that have created a unique urban mosaic. The mild climate, a rarity for Canada, allows cherry trees to bloom as early as February, transforming entire streets into pink corridors that attract photographers from every corner of the planet. But can such a lively metropolis be intimately connected with nature? Certainly, and Stanley Park is the most evident proof. 988 acres of temperate rainforest set in the urban center and surrounded by a waterfront of almost 6 miles where cyclists and pedestrians share idyllic panoramas. You can also explore the totems that tell the stories of various Indigenous Canadian peoples, called First Nations, walking at Brockton Point along paths shaded by ancient sequoias. Furthermore, The hidden lakes in the park host great blue herons, fishing undisturbed, just steps away from city traffic. Returning to the city instead, in the Gastown district, gas lamps illuminate the stone streets, where the history of the first settlers meets the creative energy of a young and dynamic city. At sunset, the skyline lights up, with the North Shore Mountains turning pink. This is the magic of Vancouver, a perfect balance between wilderness and urban sophistication. Mount Rainier National Park. "14,000 feet of pure majesty that dominates Seattle's horizon." Mount Rainier isn't just a mountain, but a sleeping giant that has shaped the entire surrounding landscape. Its 26 glaciers feed rivers that flow in all directions, while its past eruptions have created the valleys that today host forests of firs and alpine meadows. In summer, when the snow retreats, the Paradise and Sunrise areas become explosions of color. Purple lupines, red castilloria, and alpine daisies transform the slopes into living carpets. But it's the vastness that really strikes you. From the summit, the view spans from the Pacific Ocean to the Cascade Range mountain chain, embracing thousands of square miles of wilderness. Here you understand why Native Americans call this mountain Tacoma, which means the mountain that touches the clouds. And this wasn't just a name, it was a daily truth. Columbia River Gorge. Listen to the roar of falling water. The Columbia River Gorge is a spectacular gash, carved by the Columbia River through the Cascade mountain range. But what makes this canyon truly special are its waterfalls. Over 90 waterfalls that plunge from rocky walls up to 1,970 feet high. For example, there are the Multnomah Falls with their 620-foot freefall. But these are just the appetizer. Here, the wind blows constantly, perpetually, and creates perfect conditions for windsurfing and kitesurfing. Native Americans considered this place sacred, and you'll understand why when you see the morning mist rising from the river, while sun rays filter through the pines. There's also the historic Columbia River Highway, built in 1916 and running alongside the canyon, offering breathtaking views at every turn. This gorge, therefore, is a natural corridor where water has sculpted the impossible. Whistler. Imagine yourself surrounded by majestic mountains that seem to touch the sky, with fresh air filling your lungs and adrenaline flowing in your veins. This is Whistler, a paradise for winter sports which hosted the 2010 Olympics, but which hides much more than simple ski slopes. In the heart of the coastal mountains of British Columbia, Whistler changes face with the seasons. A perfect white blanket in winter gives way in summer to breathtaking hiking trails and crystalline alpine lakes. The pedestrian village, moreover, welcomes with typical Canadian warmth, mixing discreet luxury and spirit of adventure in perfect harmony. Typically, tourists here come for the snow, but end up staying for the fiery sunsets on the peaks, for the deer crossing the woods, and for that sense of freedom that only Canadian wilderness can give. North Cascades National Park. Welcome to the Alps of America. Over 300 glaciers continuously sculpt these mountains, creating a landscape that seems to emerge from the Dolomites, but with an entirely American wildness. The granite peaks rise steeply from the valleys, where lakes of an impossible turquoise reflect rock walls that defy gravity. Lake Diablo, for example, owes its unreal color to the finest glacial sediments, which are rock particles so fine they diffuse light in a unique way. In this park, however, don't expect simple trails, because nature allows itself to be conquered only by those willing to work a little. But the reward is nonetheless extraordinary, with every mile revealing breathtaking panoramas. Furthermore, this is the least visited national park in Washington state, and which means only one thing: you'll be able to experience the majesty of these mountains almost in solitude. Cannon Beach. Cannon Beach stretches for 4 miles with fine golden sand, perfect for long walks, while seagulls soar above the waves. The name comes from a cannon found here in 1846, remnant of a shipwreck that recalls stories of explorers and adventurers. Here stands Haystack Rock, which rises from the ocean like a 236-foot monolith, witness to volcanic eruptions that occurred 15 million years ago. This rock formation isn't just beautiful to look at, but during low tide transforms into a natural aquarium, where sea anemones, starfish, and hermit crabs create a colorful ecosystem. Moreover, when marine fog envelops the coast, the monolith appears and disappears, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. This beach, therefore, represents a perfect balance between wild beauty and accessibility, where the primordial force of the Pacific Ocean merges with postcard landscapes, making every sunset an unforgettable experience. Seattle. Among the hills that dive into the Puget Sound estuary, Seattle spreads like a metropolis that has made reinvention its trademark. Glass and steel skyscrapers reflect the clouds while neighborhoods climb the slopes, creating a unique urban topography. This is the city that gave the world the grunge music genre and technology, quality coffee and e-commerce giants, and all while maintaining a strong and unmistakable identity. Water, moreover, defines every perspective. Elliott Bay opens the horizon westward, while Lake Union and Lake Washington embrace the city, creating peninsulas and inlets that break the urban grid. Ferries constantly move between the islands, carrying commuters and tourists without ever stopping. But it's the Space Needle that captures Seattle's essence. This futuristic tower built for the 1962 World's Fair, with its characteristic flying saucer shape, isn't just an architectural icon, but is the symbol of a city that has always looked ahead. From its 600-foot height, the panorama embraces everything. You can see the snow-capped peaks of the Cascades, Mount Rainier dominating the southern horizon, and even the infinite waters of the Pacific. Mount Hood National Forest. Imagine walking through a forest with trees that touch the sky. Mount Hood National Forest spans over 990,000 acres of wild nature, dominated by the unmistakable silhouette of this volcano, standing 11,249 feet tall. Here, the intense fragrance of Douglas firs mingles with the fresh mountain air, while footsteps sink into the carpet of needles that crackle underfoot. Along the trails, lakes like Mirror and Trillium reflect the snow-capped peak, while sequoias and red firs rise for dozens of feet, creating a canopy of branches where sunbeams filter through. In summer, alpine meadows explode in a kaleidoscope of purple lupines and red Indian paintbrush. But it's in winter that this place reveals its true magic. The Timberline Lodge, indeed, built in the 1930s during the Great Depression, becomes a golden refuge against the blinding white of the snow. Skiers and snowboarders, moreover, race down the ski slopes, while the volcano's fumaroles remind us that beneath that beauty, a primordial force still sleeps. It's surely a realm where nature still dictates the rules. Tofino. Clinging to the western end of Vancouver Island, it is where Canada ends and magic begins. This fishing village, transformed into a surfer's paradise, challenges the Pacific Ocean with quiet courage, while spectacular storms batter the coast during the winter months, attracting curious visitors from around the world. The true essence of Tofino emerges, however, walking along Chesterman Beach, where the morning fog creates a mystical veil over the figures of surfers challenging the perfect waves, regardless of the cold water. Furthermore, temperate rainforests with thousand-year-old cedars surround this outpost of civilization, creating a hypnotic contrast between the blue of the ocean and the intense green of the trees. Here, the wild landscape constantly changes with the tides, revealing stretches of coastline rich with marine life, while eagles soar over the jagged cliffs, giving life to a place where untouched nature reigns supreme in all its majestic beauty. Mount St. Helens. On May 18, 1980, at 8:32 in the morning, this mountain rewrote the geography of the Pacific Northwest. An explosion swept away 1,300 feet of height and created a crater over half a mile wide. But what you see now isn't destruction, but rebirth. Nature has reclaimed these lands with incredible force. In fact, where there was once only ash and mud, now young forests and flowering meadows grow. The Johnston Ridge Observatory brings you face to face with the smoking crater, while the Visitor Center tells how life returns stronger than before. Elk graze among the trunks of dead trees, beavers have rebuilt their dams in the new lakes, and Spirit Lake reflects a landscape that seems alien but pulses with vitality. This is the most powerful lesson that nature can give us, because even the most total destruction is only the beginning of a new story. Portland. The aroma of roasted coffee mingles with the scent of freshly baked donuts, while fine rain creates a silver veil over downtown rooftops. Portland isn't just a city, it's a successful social experiment, where gourmet food trucks park next to bookstores that sell used books 24 hours a day. This is due precisely to the Keep Portland Weird culture. That is, Keep Portland Strange, which isn't just a tourist slogan here, but a life philosophy. The city's bridges, moreover, aren't just crossings, but works of art that tell stories. There's the Burnside Bridge, for example, which opens to let boats pass, while from Tom McCall Waterfront Park you see Mount Hood peeking between the skyscrapers. It's also known as the City of Roses for its lush gardens, and is an example of sustainable urban planning with a vast park system and an enviable network of bike paths. Okanagan Valley. A desert in Canada? Well, almost. The Okanagan Valley challenges every stereotype, with landscapes that recall Tuscany and Provence, more than the Great North. This unique microclimate in British Columbia is the cradle of the Canadian wine industry, with over 200 wineries distributed among gentle golden hills. Lake Okanagan, a blue ribbon 84 miles long, is the pulsing heart of the valley, where hot summers invite diving between one tasting and another. But be careful. According to local legend, Ogopogo, the monster that the native Shilks venerated as the spirit of the lake, would hide in the depths of the lake. Continuing orchards of peaches, cherries, and apples alternate with vineyards, creating a mosaic of colors that changes with the seasons. This can be defined as the California of Canada, where nature has decided to generously concentrate sun, water, and perfect terroir to create an unexpected gastronomic paradise. Puget Sound. "43 miles of salt water that transforms Washington's landscape into an urban archipelago." Puget Sound isn't just a bay, but the pulsing heart of the region, where cities, islands, and wild nature intertwine in a unique mix. Its waters host resident orcas, seals, and sea lions, while along the coasts alternate pebble beaches, cliffs covered with firs, and ports that smell of fresh salmon. Ferries transform every trip into a mini-cruise and go from Seattle to Bainbridge Island, or from Edmonds to Kingston, and every crossing offers panoramas that change with the seasons and atmospheric conditions. But when the morning fog rises from the waters, it reveals a fairy tale landscape where modern skyscrapers stand alongside primordial forests. It's here that you understand why the Pacific Northwest has inspired generations of artists, writers, and visionaries. Painted hills. As if a painter had spilled paint cans on gentle rolling hills, the painted hills are pure geological magic. These red, yellow, black, and gold striations aren't random, but each band tells 35 million years of climate history. Red is oxidized iron during hot and dry periods, yellow is iron deposits in more humid environments, and black is ancient petrified forests. The John Day Fossil Beds National Monument, of which these hills are part, guards one of North America's richest fossil deposits. The best time to visit this place is late afternoon, when light angulation enhances every shade and shadows create depth among the terrain's folds. Sawtooth Mountains. Granite blades slash through Idaho's sky like teeth of an ancient saw, and that's exactly why they call them sawtooth. Here, where the earth rebels upward into sharp spires and cutting ridges, time seems to have stopped in the glacial era. Alpine lakes reflect these stone cathedrals like perfect mirrors, while trails wind through green forests and flowering meadows that explode with impossible colors every summer. The Sawtooth Scenic Byway, which is a 115-mile scenic road, crosses the heart of this wilderness, revealing marvelous panoramas at every curve, from Mount McGowan's glaciers to deep canyons. The rarefied air carries with it the scent of white pine and the satisfying sound of streams descending from perpetual snows. Stanley, the small town at the foot of the mountains, counts less than 100 souls, but guards access to over 740,000 acres of protected wilderness. This isn't just a landscape, but rather a manifesto of nature's primordial force, where every step reminds you how small we are when faced with the majesty of mountains. Willamette Valley. Spread like a green carpet between the Cascade Mountains and the Coast Range, it's the beating heart of agricultural Oregon. This 149-mile valley first nourished Native Americans with its salmon and acorns. Then Oregon Trail pioneers with its fertile lands. Today it's world famous for its Pinot Noir, which are wines born from volcanic soils and a perfect Mediterranean climate. Driving along secondary roads, you discover vineyards, hop fields for craft beer, pear orchards, and cherries. The Jory Hills, with their iron-rich red soil, host wineries where you can taste award-winning wines while admiring Mount Hood peaking on the horizon. Here, every season has its rhythm. Harvest in autumn, pruning in winter, flowering in spring, and golden sun in summer. Snoqualmie Falls. "270 feet of free fall that transform the Snoqualmie River into a natural spectacle accessible to all. The river, in fact, is born from the snows of Snoqualmie Pass, crossing forests of firs and cedars before concentrating all its force in this dramatic waterfall. The falls plunge into a pool surrounded by rock walls where giant ferns and mosses grow that transform every surface into a vertical garden. For the Snoqualmie tribe, this place is sacred. It's the place where the spirits of ancestors live in the mist that rises from the waters. The Salish Lodge, perched above the falls, transforms every breakfast into a spectacle, while the trail to the base crosses a forest where centuries-old cedars create true natural cathedrals. Kelowna. In the heart of the sunny Okanagan Valley, Kelowna shines like a jewel set among arid mountains and cobalt blue waters of Lake Okanagan. This city in British Columbia challenges the stereotypical image of cold Canada with over 2,000 hours of sunshine per year, which nourish award-winning vineyards and lush orchards. Walking along the waterfront, you can forget you are in Canada, with palm trees, sandy beaches, and sails dotting the horizon, creating an almost Mediterranean atmosphere. But just look up to see the snow-capped mountains in the distance, a perfect reminder of Canadian landscape diversity. Another fundamental aspect is the relaxed rhythm that permeates the area, and that allows you to start the day with a kayak at dawn, continue with a tasting tour among vineyards, and conclude by observing the sunset with a glass of ice wine. The sweet nectar that has made this region famous in the world. Lake Crescent. Seven and a half miles of water, so transparent that trout seem to swim suspended in the void. This lake, 590 feet deep, guards secrets that date back to the last ice age. Its icy waters, in fact, have preserved fallen tree trunks for decades, creating a submerged forest visible from the shores. Mount Storm King, moreover, reflects perfectly in the calm waters, while the Lake Lodge maintains the charm of the 1930s alive. But what makes this place magical is the silence. No motors, only kayaks that glide in water between water splashes and wind rustling. Shannon Falls. Imagine a river of water that plunges for 1,099 feet between black granite walls, surrounded by gigantic century-old Douglas firs. Shannon Falls, the third highest waterfall in British Columbia, is not just a visual spectacle, but a multi-sensory experience that envelops with its constant roar and refreshing mist that rises from the impact. Located near Squamish, along the scenic Sea-to-Sky Highway between Vancouver and Whistler, this natural wonder is easily accessible, but retains an aura of primordial mystery. The plunging water comes from alpine glaciers, creating a flow that changes personality with the seasons, being impetuous during the spring thaw and more contained but no less fascinating in summer. A short path among emerald green mosses and giant ferns brings tourists close enough to feel the power of nature that has shaped this dramatic landscape, reminding us how small we are in the face of geological forces. Smith Rock. Imagine rock towers rising in the desert, colored in all shades from orange to deep red. This is Smith Rock. Rock formations made of volcanic ash welded by heat that tell a story of eruptions that occurred 30 million years ago. Smith Rock is also the park where modern sport climbing was born in the 1980s, but you don't need to be climbers to be enchanted by it. In fact, here the contrast is surprising. On one side, the desert of Central Oregon with its junipers and sagebrush. On the other, the Cascade Mountains that profile on the horizon. The Crooked River flows at the base of the walls, creating a green oasis that attracts red-tailed hawks and golden eagles. At sunset, when light ignites the rocks like burning coals, you understand why photographers come here from all over the world. Thor's Well. Welcome to the so-called Gate to Hell of the Pacific Ocean. Thor's Well is a geological phenomenon that defies all logic. It's a rocky pool that seems to swallow the ocean without ever filling up. Located on the Yahat's coast, this basaltic formation creates a perfect optical illusion when waves crash against it. During high tide, seawater pours into the pool and then mysteriously disappears, as if there existed a secret tunnel to the center of the earth. The black volcanic rock contrasts with the white of the sea foam, creating a dramatic effect that has inspired legends and myths. The best time to admire this spectacle is 1 hour before high tide, when the waves are high enough to fill the well, but not so high as to cover it completely. Cape Flattery. The northwesternmost point of the continental United States deserves a journey to the edges of the known world. Cape Flattery extends into the Pacific like the bow of a giant ship, offering panoramas that span from the oceanic infinite to the jagged coasts of Vancouver Island. The trail to reach the viewpoint crosses a temperate rainforest with millennial cedars and a deafening silence, interrupted only by the distant sound of waves that crash on the cliffs. Tatoosh Island, moreover, with its automatic lighthouse, floats like an outpost in nothingness, while the currents clash, creating whirlpools and foam that reveal the power of the underlying waters. This is Maka tribe territory, guardians of these lands for over 2,000 years, and every step reminds us that we're walking on still, sacred land. Trillium Lake. What you see before you is one of Oregon's most photographed places. And we're talking about Mount Hood, perfectly reflected in the calm waters of Trillium Lake. This small artificial basin, created in 1960 for recreational and environmental purposes, has become a magnet for photographers and nature lovers. The secret, however, lies in the details. In fact, in the early morning hours when the air is still and the water becomes a perfect mirror, Mount Hood appears upside down, creating a symmetrical effect that takes your breath away. The trilliums, which are the three-petaled white flowers from which the lake takes its name, bloom in spring, transforming the undergrowth into a white carpet. But beware, because this paradise is accessible only from May to October, when the snow melts and the road becomes passable. In autumn, when maple leaves turn red and gold, Mount Hood's reflection becomes something truly magical and rich with colors. Priest Lake. Forget everything you know about mountain lakes, because Priest Lake behaves like an ocean trapped among forests. Over 19 miles long, waters deep up to 300 feet, and a character that completely changes from one shore to another. This lake owes its name to missionaries who in 1800 established the first missions here. But its history begins much earlier with the native Kalispel who navigated these waters in birch bark canoes. The northern part of the lake is called Upper Priest Lake and is completely wild, accessible only by boat or after long hikes. Here you can find the last refuge of grizzly bears in Idaho and forests of giant cedars that existed before Columbus discovered America, all surrounded by an almost deafening and regenerating silence. Bellingham. Imagine a city nestled between sparkling bays and mountains covered with forests. Bellingham is exactly this, and spreads along its bay with that vibrant energy that characterizes Pacific Northwest centers. The historic downtown preserves the charm of old port districts, where red brick buildings tell stories of sailors and timber merchants. But it's the geographic position that makes Bellingham special. To the north open the San Juan Islands. To the east, the North Cascades promise alpine adventures, while to the west, the Pacific Ocean offers sunsets that set the horizon ablaze. Fairhaven, the historic district, maintains the atmosphere of gold rush times, with vintage shops and coffee shops that serve perhaps the best coffee in the Northwest. And it's right here that Pacific Northwest culture expresses itself at its best. Outdoor lifestyle, environmental sustainability, and a quality of life that makes much larger metropolises envious. Columbia River Gorge waterfalls. Among the dozens of waterfalls that dot the canyon created by the Columbia River, 3 stand out for charm and accessibility. Wakulla Falls welcome tourists after a 1.2-mile walk through a narrow canyon where light filters through rock walls creating light plays. Here, water from Tanner Creek falls 351 feet, forming a liquid curtain that shatters on basaltic rocks, while moss covers every surface, creating an emerald green carpet. Lateral Falls, instead, point straight down, with 246 feet of free fall, ending in a perfectly circular pool. The particularity is that you can walk behind the waterfall, thanks to a natural cave carved by erosion. Multnomah Falls, finally, with their 620 feet of height, are Oregon's tallest and the most visited in the Pacific Northwest. Divided into two levels, they're connected by a historic bridge from 1914 that offers a breathtaking view of the upper 541-foot waterfall. In autumn, when maple leaves turn fiery red, these waterfalls become living paintings, with water contrasting with the vegetation's warm colors. Lake Chelan. "31 miles of crystalline water, set among mountains that rise up to 8,200 feet. Lake Chelan extends like a blue blade in the heart of the North Cascades, and its elongated shape, which is given by the glaciers of the Ice Age, that carved a depression over 1,500 feet deep. This exceptional depth keeps the waters cool even during the hottest summers, creating a perfect microclimate for viticulture along the southern shores. Lake Chelan's waters change color during the day, passing from the deep blue of morning to the brilliant turquoise of afternoon, when the sun penetrates the more superficial layers. It's a lake that invites contemplation with its majestic dimensions and the mountain frame that surrounds it, offering different scenery at every curve of its sinuous shores. Revelstoke. Hidden between the Selkirk and Monashee Mountains of British Columbia, Revelstoke is the best-kept secret by deep snow lovers. This small railway city has reinvented itself as a skiing mecca, offering the longest skiable drop in North America. A dizzying 5,620-foot drop that makes even legendary alpine resorts pale. But Revi, as the locals affectionately call it, shines in every season. In summer, indeed, mountain bikers face adrenaline-filled trails, while hikers explore the nearby Mount Revelstoke National Park, one of the few places in the world where you can drive from temperate rainforest to alpine tundra in less than an hour. The authentic charm of Revelstoke therefore lies precisely in its perfect balance. It's developed enough to offer modern comforts, but still wild enough to make visitors feel like pioneers. The historic center is also worth visiting, with restored Victorian buildings that have snow-capped mountains as a backdrop. Sahalee Falls. The name says it all, because Sahalee in Chinook language means sky or high, and when you see this waterfall, you'll understand why. The Mackenzie River plunges 98 feet high, creating a water fan that widens downward. It's not Oregon's tallest waterfall, but its power and surrounding landscape make it truly celestial. But what makes these waterfalls special is also their sound. The water crashing on volcanic rocks creates a deep roar that you feel in your bones, almost like a primordial vibration that connects directly with nature's force. It should also be remembered that the water feeding these waterfalls is so pure that it's bottled and sold, and is fed by underground springs from the Cascade Mountains. Spirit Lake. Did you know there's a lake called Spirit? It lies hidden in the forests of northern Idaho, almost like a secret guarded by giant pines. Its waters reflect these great Douglas firs that have seen centuries pass, while along the shores you can still find traces of the first settlers, who here sought peace and isolation. The lake's name, however, is not accidental. Native tribes believe that the spirits of ancestors watched over these calm waters, and anyone who has ever walked at sunset along its shores understands why. The silence here has a different weight, almost physical, interrupted only by the call of great horned owls, and sometimes by the distant sound of a motorboat slowly crossing the surface. In the northern part of the lake, the landscape changes. The forest gives way to a swampy area, intact and wild, where water mixes with vegetation in a perfect natural balance, home to deer, herons, and beavers. Eugene. When the University of Oregon is in session, Eugene pulses like a young heart. This university city of 170,000 inhabitants gave birth to modern running. Here, in fact, in the 1970s, Coach Bill Bowerman invented the first Nike shoes in his kitchen, and today, Hayward Field has become the world temple of track and field. But Eugene doesn't live only on sports. Every Saturday, in fact, downtown transforms into a lively open-air market, where local artisans display their creations, including ceramics, silver jewelry, beeswax candles, and lavender-scented soaps. Spencer Butte, instead, dominates the city's southern horizon, and a 40-minute climb takes you up this volcanic hill where the entire valley opens beneath your feet. Rialto Beach. Prepare for a visual impact that redefines the concept of beach. Rialto Beach welcomes you with giant logs bleached by salt and amassed by the Pacific's force like natural sculptures. And the ocean here doesn't mess around. There are waves that arrive from thousands of miles that crash on black rocks called sea stacks, creating foam geysers that reach incredible heights. But Rialto's real treasure hides among the volcanic rocks. When the tide retreats, in fact, natural pools are revealed that guard a miniature universe. We find sea anemones in bright colors, starfish that move slowly, and small crabs that run among the seaweed. It's a natural aquarium that changes appearance with every tide, always offering new discoveries to the most attentive explorers. Deception Pass Bridge. Two steel spans that cross one of the most dramatic scenes of the Pacific Northwest. The Deception Pass Bridge connects Fidalgo Island to Whidbey Island, offering a vertiginous view of one of Puget Sound's busiest water passages. Under the bridge, tidal currents create whirlpools and rapids that have made this passage famous and feared among navigators. The waters contrast with the fir forests that descend to the shore, while rocky islets emerge like backs of sleeping whales. The state park that surrounds the bridge offers trails that lead to even more spectacular viewpoints, proving that sometimes the most beautiful destination is precisely the journey to get there. Besides being a symbol of engineering, this bridge is a window onto America's most complex and fascinating geography. Coosa Falls. The roar of water plunging 69 feet high accompanies you from a distance, when you still can't see the waterfall, through the Douglas firs. Coosa Falls are one of the hidden gems of the Mackenzie River, along scenic Byway 126. Here, water precipitates vertically, creating a stark contrast with the dark volcanic rocks. The mist rising from the base forms intermittent rainbows on sunny days, while the mile-and-a-half trail leads through an ancient forest. Gigantic western red cedars frame this natural spectacle, while the temperature is always cool, even in midsummer, thanks to the water's cooling effect and the dense canopy's shade. Spokane. In the heart of Washington's interior, where prairies meet forests, Spokane spreads along the banks of the river of the same name, with a character all its own. The city itself preserves architecture that tells of its golden age, when timber and mining magnates built palaces worthy of European capitals. And then there are the Spokane Falls, which roar right in the city center, creating a natural spectacle that has shaped local history since the time of native tribes. Riverfront Park transforms former industrial areas into green spaces, with the sound of water mixing with the voices of children playing. But this city has a secret. It's the gateway to some of the most remote wilderness areas of the Northwest. Half an hour away by car, in fact, forests begin that extend to Idaho and Montana. Clear lakes hidden among the hills, and trails that lead to idyllic panoramas. Coastal lighthouses of Oregon. Oregon's coast is dotted with over a dozen historic lighthouses, each with its own personality and stories. But two of these stand out for charm and importance. Two white sentinels that defy time and storms. The Yaquina Bay Lighthouse, built in 1871, is the only lighthouse in Oregon where the keeper lived right in the tower. Its light has guided thousands of ships through Newport's dangerous bay. But what truly strikes you is the contrast between the structure's candid white and the intense green of the pines surrounding it. 37 miles further north instead, the Hesida Head Lighthouse dominates the cliffs from 197 feet high. Its light, visible up to 21 miles away, is among the most powerful on the Pacific coast. Here, marine fog creates magical light plays, while the keeper's house, transformed into a bed and breakfast, offers breathtaking views, where the ocean disappears on the horizon. Two lighthouses, two eras, and one mission: protect those who navigate the Pacific's most treacherous waters. Leavenworth. How do you transform a dying town into a successful destination? Leavenworth found the answer precisely in Bavarian architecture. In the 1960s, in fact, when the timber industry was in crisis, the inhabitants decided to completely reinvent their city, transforming every building into a replica of German architecture. In winter, snow transforms the city into a Christmas village, while in summer, bike paths and trails offer adventures for everyone. Today, it literally seems to come out of a grim fairy tale, with half-timbered houses, breweries that serve authentic lager beers, and Oktoberfest festivals under Washington's mountains. But it's not just folklore. On the contrary, the position makes Leavenworth perfect for exploring the Alpine Lakes Nature Reserve, where there are lakes alongside peaks that exceed 8,200 feet. Ashland. The scent of wild sage mingles with the aroma of roasted coffee, while downtown streets fill with actors walking toward the theaters. Ashland lives a double identity. In winter, it's a mountain town of 21,000 inhabitants. In summer, it's the theatrical capital of the world from February to October, when the Oregon Shakespeare Festival brings almost 500,000 visitors here. Lithia Park crosses the city's heart like a green river of 93 acres, with trails flanking centennial oaks and naturally carbonated mineral water springs that locals consider an elixir of long life. The Siskiyou Mountains, moreover, embrace Ashland with ponderosa pine forests and clearings where California poppies and wild lupines grow. Port Townsend. Stop and breathe. Port Townsend is the gateway to a natural paradise that extends well beyond the city limits, where the Olympic Peninsula reveals its wildest treasures. In the harbor, vintage sailboats and modern yachts sway gently, while the Victorian town climbs the hill with its pastel-colored houses that look at the bay. Kala Point emerges as a spectacular promontory that extends into the Strait of Juan de Fuca, offering wild panoramas of the waters and the San Juan Islands. The trails that wind through the forest lead to cliffs rich with bald eagles, seals, and orcas. The coast breaks into hidden bays and pebble beaches, while the temperate rainforests that surround the area host black-tailed deer, raccoons, and the occasional black bear. Here, Pacific Northwest nature shows all its primitive and uncontaminated power. Leslie Gulch. Welcome to the wildest far west that exists, where volcanic rock spires rise in a canyon that seems from a Western movie. Leslie Gulch is a collection of honey-colored rock formations, sculpted by 15 million years of wind and rain. This remote canyon near the Idaho border hides surprises at every turn, including natural arches, pinnacles that defy gravity, and caves that seem like hermits' dwellings. The 15-mile dirt road leading here is already an adventure in itself, and during the journey you can see peregrine falcons and golden eagles, while prickly cacti and wild lupins bloom on the slopes. Finally, the Owyhee River flows in the valley bottom, creating a green oasis in this Martian landscape. Rosario Beach. Hidden on Fidalgo Island, this gem of Deception Pass State Park proves that not all treasures are easy to find. Rosario Beach is reached through a trail that passes among Douglas firs and madronas, until it emerges on a protected bay where Puget Sound water takes on tones ranging from emerald green to cobalt blue. When the tide retreats, the pools among the rocks transform into natural aquariums where you can observe purple starfish, spiny sea urchins, and colorful anemones that live in this miniature ecosystem. But the real spectacle arrives at sunset when the red rocks that give the beach its name light up with golden reflections. Furthermore, the currents of deception pass visible from the beach, create whirlpools and rapids that make this stretch of sea one of the most spectacular and feared by Puget Sound navigators. Newport. The scent of fresh fish and marine algae welcomes you at Newport's historic bayfront. This fishing port, transformed into a tourist attraction, still pulses with the authentic rhythm of maritime life. Crab fishermen's boats sway in the harbor, while sea lions crowd the piers, creating sounds that echo among the fish warehouses. The majestic Yaquina Bay Bridge dominates the landscape with its elegant arches, built in 1936 and having become the recognizable symbol of the city, connecting the two shores of the bay with its structure that reflects in the waters below. There's also the Yaquina Head Lighthouse, with its 92-foot height, which still guides ships after 150 years of service. Finally, when the sun sets behind the horizon, painting the ocean orange and purple, you understand why Newport is called the Pearl of the Oregon Coast. Tacoma. What happens when an industrial city decides to completely reinvent itself? Tacoma is the answer. Where smokestacks once smoked and pneumatic hammers resounded, today museums and artistic neighborhoods rise, that pulse with creativity. Along the streets of the historic downtown stand architectural testimonies, like the First Presbyterian Church with its imposing clock tower that marks the time of a city in constant transformation. But the real spectacle begins when you cross the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Below, in fact, Puget Sound opens up with its waters that change color depending on the wind, while on the horizon, Mount Rainier watches over the city like a protective father. Point Defiance Park instead encompasses 700 acres of forests, beaches, and zoo, demonstrating how Tacoma has managed to balance urban progress and wild nature. This, therefore, is no longer just the city of steel, but is the laboratory where the future of the Northwest takes shape. Bandon. Forget everything you know about golf courses. Bandon Dunes Golf Resort has transformed the natural dunes of this small coastal town into a paradise for links golf lovers, which is a style of golf born in Scotland that exploits natural terrain without altering it. Here, the ocean wind shapes every shot, while waves crash just yards from the green. But Bandon isn't just golf. The town, in fact, is famous for its cranberries, harvested by flooding the fields, which in autumn turn red with fruits floating on the surface. The historic center, instead, rebuilt after a devastating fire in 1936, maintains the charm of yesteryear with its colorful Victorian houses. And then there are the beaches. Miles of golden sand dotted with rock formations emerging from the ocean. It's certainly a small jewel where tradition and innovation merge. Dry Falls. "50 millennia ago, here flowed the most powerful waterfall the world had ever seen. The Dry Falls are what remains of a geological cataclysm. In fact, when the ice dams of Lake Missoula gave way, they released unimaginable volumes of water that carved canyons and created this rocky wall 400 feet high and over 3 miles wide. Today, silence reigns, where waterfalls 10 times more powerful than Niagara once roared. The Visitor Center tells the story through models that help imagine the flood's force, while from the viewpoint, the gaze embraces the Grand Coulee and the lakes that dot the desert. This is the demonstration that the landscape we see today is only the last frame of a story that began millions of years ago. Willamette River. There's something hypnotic about the Willamette River. Maybe it's its 187 miles of water that cross Oregon with the calm of those who have all the time in the world. This river also has a unique particularity. In fact, it's one of the few in the world that flows from south to north, collecting waters from over 40 tributaries before flowing into the Columbia. But the Willamette isn't just water, Indeed, it's Oregon's backbone. Its fertile banks attracted the first settlers in the 1840s, giving birth to the famous Oregon Trail. And today, while navigating between Portland and Salem, you see an ecosystem that has been reborn. In the 1970s, the river was so polluted that fish couldn't survive. But thanks to decades of cleanup, it now hosts salmon and sturgeon again. The steamboats that once transported grain and lumber have been replaced by kayaks, houseboats, and commercial ships that transport grain, while blue herons over 3 feet tall fish patiently among the reeds. Mount Adams. The forgotten giant of the Pacific Northwest rises solitary, just exceeding 12,000 feet. In fact, while everyone looks at Mount Rainier, Mount Adams reigns undisturbed over its portion of the Cascade Range. Its perfectly conical shape reveals its volcanic origin, but what truly impresses is the majestic solitude that reigns around it. From Yakima to Portland, this mountain dominates the eastern horizon, yet remains surprisingly wild. Its slopes host one of the largest elk herds in North America, while its glaciers feed the Klickitat River. In autumn, when the larches turn golden and the air becomes crystalline, Mount Adams reveals its true nature. It's not anyone's little brother, it's simply a mountain that doesn't need to shout to be noticed. And its grandeur and beauty lies precisely in this regal discretion. This, therefore, is the Pacific Northwest. A kaleidoscope of natural and cultural wonders that challenge imagination. And if you want to explore other fantastic places in America and the world, choose from our playlist that you'll find here on the right.